Hello, grade 7s. In this lesson, we're going to continue with multiplying fractions. So last lesson we talked about multiplying whole numbers to fractions, and then this lesson is all about multiplying fractions to fractions. So product of two fractions together. So I'm going to start off with an example. Now, yesterday's example, I said that Tom, let me change my pen. We have here, so Tom eats 3/8 of a pizza. And so let's say that Jerry eats 2/3 of what Tom eats. And so what fraction of a pizza does Jerry eat? Okay, so we have here Tom eating 3/8 of a pizza, and then Jerry eating 2/3 of what Tom eats. And so what fraction of a pizza, sorry, I missed the A, does Jerry eat? So we have here a fraction problem of 2/3 of, which means times 3/8. And so this is a multiplying fractions times fractions kind of problem. And so if we want to do this visually, what does this actually mean? And so for Tom, for this pizza, Tom eats 3/8 of the pizza. So this is what Tom eats. Tom. And then for Jerry, Jerry only eats based off what Tom eats. And so we look at what Tom ate. Tom ate this much only. If I'm gonna try my best to copy exactly what it looks like, this is what Tom ate. And then for Jerry, Jerry eats 2/3 of what Tom eats. 2/3. And so that's gonna be 1, 2, 2 of the thirds. So that's what Jerry eats. And so overall, in terms of the fraction of a whole pizza, if I'm gonna continue making that whole pizza again, Jerry eats how much of a fraction of the whole pizza? That's going to be 2/8, and so Jerry eats 2/8 of the pizza of the whole pizza, which is actually 1/4. Now, in terms of the mathematical expressions, in terms of the fractions, how do we actually calculate this? So when we have fractions, we have top number times top number. So it's going to be top times top, and then we also have bottom times bottom. That's how we do fractions. If we have fractions multiplied by fractions, it's going to be top times top over bottom times bottom. Don't mix them up. And so we have here 2 times 3 all over 3 times 8. So that's what happens if we have two fractions that multiply each other. I'm sure you've learned this before, but let's just make sure we understand how to do this and we know how to do this correctly. And then you can also see that in this fraction, in this overall fraction, we have common terms that are multiples of each other, or we can simplify. So for example, this 3 and this 3 can simplify, which means that we can kind of cross them out because that's 3 and a 3, because they multiply each other. And if you don't know why we can simplify, 2 times 3 is the same as 3 times 2. So I can kind of write down that is equal to, as extra notes over here, that's equal to 3 times 2 all over 3 times 8. I can actually swap these two without changing anything. That is the properties of multiplying. And then we have here 3 over 3, which is the same as just 1. Okay, that is just the same as just 1. And then we also have here on the right side, we have 2 and 8. 2 and 8. They are both even numbers, and so for this one, 2 and 8 can simplify into 1 over 4. And so overall, our fraction becomes 1 over 4. We can simplify them, okay? So that's becomes 1 over 4. Now, if you don't want to simplify it this way by crossing because you think it's messy, you don't have to. What you can do is you can actually multiply it all out. So 2 times 3 is 6, 3 times 8 is 24, and then you can simplify that afterwards. 6 over 24 is the same as 1 over 4. But whether you want to simplify first or you want to simplify afterwards, it's usually easier to simplify first. Easier to simplify first. So let's do some examples of doing some multiplication of fractions. So example questions. We have here a. Let's do 2 over 5 times, let's do 10 over 10 over 12. Actually, that can simplify itself. So let's just do 5 over 8, like that. And so we have here, that's A. And then for B, let's do a different one. Let's do 3 over 8 times 4 over 15. And then for C, let's do one more. Let's do 7 over 11 multiplied by 5 over 28. So, what I encourage you to do is I want you to try to do these first. Pause this video right now, and then I assume you have finished. So once you finish, you can continue listening. If you haven't, then pause it and do the questions first. So for the first one, for A, we have 2 times 5 over 5 times 8. So it's the same as 2 times 5 over 5 times 8. Now, this step is optional. Optional step. You don't have to write down this step, but I do highly encourage, if you're not too strong in math, that you do write this down. And then this is, you can see that 5 and 5 over here, we have 5 over here and 5 over here. They cancel out because they can simplify with each other. And then we also have 2 over 2 and 8, which is actually now the same as just 1 over 4. 2 and 8, they both divide by 2, then that's 1 over 4. So this fraction becomes 1 over 4. Very simple, very easy. Then for B, we have 3 over 8 times 4 over 15. So we can write this as, what we can do is, if you want to skip that first step in A, what you can do is you can then start simplifying from the question directly. So 3 and the 15 both have a common factor of 3. And so I can divide both sides by 3, the top and bottom by 3, sorry, divide top and bottom. So that becomes 1. And once you divide 15 by 3, that becomes 5. And then for 4 and 8, they are both divisible by 4. So I can divide this by 4, that becomes 1. We divide the 8 by 4, that becomes 2. And so we have in the end, now I would say after you do this, you should write down this step, 1 over 2 times 1 over 5. Or you can write down 1 over 2 times 5, which is the same as 1 over 10. Now, whether you choose to write down 1 over 2 times 1 over 5 or 1 over 2 times 5, that's up to you. But you must write down at least one step, or 1 over 2 times 1 over 5. That's up to you. But it's important that you do write down at least some form of working out. Then, for C, you can see 7 and 28. 7 and 28 both have common factors of 7. They can both be divided by 7. So if we divide the top number by 7, that's 1. If we divide 28 by 7, that's 4. And then we have here 1 over 11 times 5 over 4. And then there's no more simplifying that we can do. So top times top, that's going to be 5. Bottom times bottom, that's 44. So that's how we do multiplying fractions. Now it's very important that you are confident in simplifying. We have to keep practicing how to simplify. If you have any problems with simplifying, then I do encourage you to do more questions than just the homework itself. So moving on, this time we have evaluating algebraic expressions. So we have a little bit of algebra section. So imagine, let's say we have a fraction, um, 3 over 5 times a. 3 over 5a, which means it's 3 over 5 times a. And so evaluate when a is equal to 15 over 18. So we have a is a fraction, a is 15 over 18, and then we have 3 over 5 times a. And so what we do is we would first substitute in one, is we have to substitute a, the fraction for a, the fraction into a. And so what we do is this becomes 3 over 5 times a is 15 over 18, so it's 15 over 18. And then next, step 2 is we simplify and evaluate. So once we start simplifying, 5 and 15, you can see they have common factors of 5. And so we can divide the top and the bottom by 5. So once we divide bottom by 5, that becomes 1. Once we divide the top by 5, that becomes 3. And then 3 and 18, both are multiples of 3, so we can divide top and bottom by 3. So once we divide the top by 3, that becomes 1. Once we divide the bottom by 3, that becomes 6. And so now we have 1 over 1 times 3 over 6. That's just the same as 3 over 6. And then we can now simplify. That becomes 1 over 2. So let's do some example questions. So A, let's say we have evaluate 3 over 4n when n is equal to 3 over 5. Now sometimes there isn't any simplifying that you can do if there are no common factors between the top and the bottom. So if that's the case, then we just multiply out the fractions and we leave it and try to simplify it afterwards if possible. And then for B, let's say we have 2 over 3x when x is equal to 4 over 9. So try to do these two questions first on your own. Pause this video now. And so I assume you have finished. So once we evaluate, once we put the fraction into n, this becomes 3 over 4 times 3 over 5. And then we have top times top, which is going to be 9 over, and then top, bottom times bottom, 20. No more simplifying that we can do. Then for this one, we have 2 times 4 at the top, and then we have 3 times 9 at the bottom, and that becomes 8 over 27. And again, there's no more simplifying that we can do in this question. Now, what if we have multiplying more than two fractions together? So multiplying more than two fractions. So for example, let's say we have 1 over 6 times 3 over 4 times 2 over 5. So we have three fractions that we want to multiply with each other. Now, it is still the same as top times top times top. It's going to be top, or we can say this is going to be the product of all top fractions, or all numerators, I should say, numerators, over the product of all denominators. So it's all the top numbers multiplied to each other divided by all the bottom numbers multiplied to each other. And so that will be equal to 1 times 3 times 2 at the top, all over 6 times 4 times 5. Now what happens here is we can also simplify. Remember to simplify. Simplify any, simplify common factors between top and bottom. So we're going to look over here. I can see that 3 and 6 have common factors. That's going to be, if I divide the 3 by 3 and the 6 by 3, that becomes 1, and this becomes 2. And then we also have here 2 and 2. They can cancel out. They become just 1 and 1. They don't just cancel out and become 0. Please note that, okay? When we cancel out same numbers, they become 1, 1 and 1. And so the top now becomes 1. 1 times 1 times 1 is 1. And then the bottom becomes 1 times 4 times 5, which is just 4 times 5, which is 20. So we have a fraction of 1 over 20. Now it's the same if we have 4 fractions. It's still the same. So for example, if we have 2/3 times 5/8 times 9 over 20 times, let's do one more, times 1/4. 4 fractions. Now what this means, what I can do for this one is we can first, or we can just put them all together. That's the same as 2 times 5 times 9 times 1. I would leave that 1 there just to be safe. And then we have 3 times 8 times 20 times 4. And then what we're going to do here is we're going to start looking for common factors between the top and the bottom. And so over here we have 9 and 3. So if I divide top and bottom by 3, 3 becomes 1 and 9 becomes 3. And then we also have 5 and 20. They are common factors. So I can divide both of them by 5. 5 becomes 1 and then 20 becomes 4. And then 2 and 4 is also a common factor. I can choose either one of them. So I can take this 2 over here, divide it by 2, that becomes 1, and I can take this 4 and divide it by 2, that becomes 2. And so let's clean up all this mess right here. It looks very messy, so I would advise you, highly advise you to copy it once again after simplifying. So 1 times 1 times 3 times 1 is the same as 3 at the top, and then we have 1 times 8 times 4 times 2 at the bottom. And so once you multiply them all out, it's 3 over 64, and that is the fraction. So that is it for today's lesson. Your homework for today, let me type it out over here. Homework will be to do exercise 7.2, questions 7, 9, 15, 17, 20, 23, 25, 28. And then we have, let me continue. After 28, we have 29, 31, 35, 36, and then 37, 39, 41, 43. And then we also have some problem-solving questions. Let's do 53, 58, and 63. Now, for questions 29, 31, 35, and 36, let me quickly highlight those. 29, 31, 35, and 36. For these 4 questions, you need to take note of the orders of operations. So let me star those. Orders of operations. Remember, orders of operations, we do brackets first, exponents. Okay, if you remember the orders, it's PEM, DAS, So we have parentheses or brackets, parentheses or brackets, and then we have exponents after that. That is the to the power of 2, 3, 2 squares, cubes, and then for here we have multiply, divide. So times and divide in order of left to right. There's no first or second, it's just order of left to right. And then we also have add and subtract. So remember the orders of operations for those 4 questions because you will need to do it correctly, okay? That's it for today's lesson, and I will see you all in the next lesson.